You just jump from the pot right into the fire. A child loses somebody they love. They go through a period of grief. We all do when we lose somebody we love. But guess what? Children who are losing people they love to gun violence, natural death, unnatural death, are a significant source of new special education referral. Why? Because we fail to recognize that these are people who need time to heal. So he loses his grandmother who raised him because you wasn't around. So the grandmother raised him. Grandma dies. Big mama dies. You think he's supposed to shake it off in 2 weeks. He go back to school. He getting in fights, beating people up, cursing the teachers out. He never did this before. Now the school's saying we need you to go get him tested because we think he needs some medicine to manage his emotions. Some Risperidol, okay? Some Concerta, some Depakote. So now your son is on crack for kids because you didn't want to get him no grief therapy. Now for those who don't know, there's 5 stages in the grieving process, okay? 5. The first stage is called shock. That's when you first find out that you lost somebody you love. Shock. That's stage 1. Stage 2 is denial. You deny the fact that you lost the person you love. I'm giving you this why? Because some of y'all have children who's still grieving. I don't care how long ago the person they love died. They could have died 10 years ago. There's no timeline on grief. And some of your children are struggling in school, not because they can't do the work, but they need to process some life events. But because you don't want nobody in your business, they got to suffer in silence. Stage 3, bargaining. Bargaining is when you talk to the deceased or you talk to God and you ask them for another chance. Can you come back so we can make this right? God, give me back my sister. We was on bad terms when she passed away. This can't go down like this. Bring them back. Let me make it right. Denial. Bargaining. As you can see, if you're bargaining, you're still in denial because you're not accepting it going because you're trying to strike a deal. Stage 4 is acceptance. That's when you finally accept that the person is gone. That's where we want people to get to, right? But the problem with acceptance is what? That can lead you to a deep depression because once you accept that they're not coming back, that can be a very painful thing. The last stage is resolution. That's when you're able to integrate the experience into your life and move on. Resolution is the goal. Resolution is the goal. Now, a lot of us, children and adults, we fluctuate between acceptance and resolution or bargaining and acceptance. Sometimes when we lose somebody we love, we develop a what? Chemical addiction because we don't want to get to acceptance. So we've been drinking since mom died. We've been self-medicating with marijuana since our husband passed away. Okay? We've been shopping like crazy, spending every dollar we make since we lost our favorite cousin. Okay? You ain't accepted yet. You might not be in denial, but you haven't quite yet accepted it. Listen to me. As it relates to children, even though education is important, it is not more important than working through their own personal issues. For example, some of our children come from homes where the parents fight and fuss every day. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Fight and fuss every day. We know we don't deserve to be together or shouldn't be together because this just ain't working. But guess what? We're not going to get no counseling. We're not going to separate for a while and work it out. We're just going to stay in here because it looks good to the rest of the world in my church to see that we still married. Because that's what the pastor said we're supposed to do. So you think you're doing your children a blessing, but you're really doing them a curse. Because a child living in a house with both parents who don't do nothing but fuss and fight all day is worse off than the kid living with one. And then we got the single parent phenomenon. I got single fathers who tell me at the fathers group, I don't need the mother, I can be the mother too. I got the so-called strong black woman syndrome that says, I don't need his father, I can be a dad too. No, you can't. And one of the reasons why we have so much mental illness in our young people is because many of them are psychologically unstable because the amount of masculine energy they got from their dad and the amount of feminine energy they got from their mom was not balanced. See, if a boy gets too much feminine and not enough masculine, you may have just effeminized him. And if a girl gets too much masculine and not enough feminine, you may have just masculinized her. They need both. One doesn't do. If you look at every psychological illness of what makes a healthy adult, children who come from stable two-parent homes, they live longer, they're healthier, less depression, less chance of chemical dependence, stay married when they get married, as opposed to being a serial monogamous. So my point is they need both parents. And guess what else, parents? It is not your place to decide whether the other parent is good enough to be in their life. All right. Because I get a lot of that. Well, you know what? He do need his father. But until he stops selling drugs, he can't see him. Well, wait a minute now. When he has your son, is he selling drugs? No, he wouldn't do that. They normally at the grandma's house where the pop lived. He take him to the movies, that kind of a thing. Is he at war with any drug deal, anything, you know, any violence? No, he ain't been in nothing like that, but he just selling. But I don't like that. I don't want that around my son. I understand that shouldn't be around your son. But if we had assurances from him that it ain't going to be around your son, then he need to see that boy. Or, if you don't trust him, let's do supervised visitation where he come somewhere neutral, okay, to see his son for a couple hours or however. But that boy needs that masculine energy. But to say he can't be with his father because his father's selling drugs on the corner, that's not a justification. Okay? Fathers, we come up with excuses too. Okay? He can't see his mom, she can't see his mom because she's around too many men. Well, when she's with your children, are the men around? Nah, she don't bring them around the children. But still, I don't think that's being a good role model. You should have thought about that before you laid down.
Wow.
I'm saying it. Because in the black community, children are the weapon that we use against each other. Failing to recognize that every time we castigate the other parent in front of the children, you're chipping away at their self-esteem, not the other parents. Because they are both. So no matter who you talk about, you're talking about me. To make a child choose which parent they're going to side with is ridiculous. And what else, parents? Y'all got to stop thinking that just because you got a husband who better than the biological to the child, or you got a wife who's better than the biological mother to the child, understand something about children. They want their own. Make sure your wife don't take offense. Make sure your husband don't take offense. It's not that you're not a good stepfather. He loves you too, but you're not his biological. He needs the connection to his God nature, and you ain't it. You're a surrogate. You're a good surrogate. Don't take offense to what's going on, but you are not the biological. And a child wants their own mother or their own father. They don't care if they're homeless, on drugs, ain't got a job, crazy. They want their own. Let them have it. And when they want their father and don't get their father, they come to school and they daydream all class day. 8 to 3, they staring out the room. 8 to 3, they scribbling in a notebook. And after a while, guess what? It's time for some ADHD medication. Because you know what ADHD stands for, right? Absence of my daddy from my damn home disorder. Give me my father back. Don't give me no pills. I want my father. You want to give him pills because you don't want to give him his daddy. This whole ADHD thing is ridiculous. Half the kids in many of our schools, the black boys, especially in the inner city, half of them on medication. Now, why should that automatically raise a flag for you? Statistically, mental illness should be no more than 15 to 20% of any population. So if mental illness should not be any more than 20, How you get half? You know why? Because half their daddy's in jail. Half their dad's been arrested. Half of them ain't got no men in the house. So guess what? The teachers are saying, we ain't got to be bothered with this. Because he's on medication, and ever since he's been on the medication, I don't have no problems out of him. Nobody's talking about the fact that the medicine killing his brain cells. We're not going to talk about that. We're not going to talk about the fact that it's messing with his kidney. We ain't going to talk about that. We're not going to talk about the kidney, the liver, the heart. We're not going to talk about the strokes and the heart attacks. We're not going to talk about the epilepsy and diabetes that it caused. We're not going to talk about the fact that he's now hallucinating. He's seeing things and he's hearing things telling him to do things. We're going to talk about the fact that she gained 30 pounds in a month or lost 30 because of the drug. We're going to talk about the fact they can't stay asleep or can't go to sleep or can't wake up. Most importantly, we ain't going to talk about the fact that the drugs we giving these black and Latino boys is destroying their ability to produce healthy semen, so when they're old enough to have children, they will not be able to impregnate their wives because you thought it was important that they could sit still long enough to be miseducated. When do we wake up? The problem ain't the children, it's the adults. Stop getting my little brothers and little sisters tested when you know why they're doing what they're doing. You might be the problem. And if you're the problem, special ed can't solve it. All right. You evaluate to gain additional information about a problem that you know. You evaluate to determine if they have a DSM disorder. Normothetic versus idiographic information. If you want to compare the child's skill compared to their skills in other areas. So my reading versus my math. Or compare my reading to the reading of other children. Normothetic versus idiographic. Clinical versus psycho-ed. School psychology, that's psychoeducational evaluation. Whenever you hear school psychology, you're automatically talking about a psychoeducational evaluation. When you hear clinical psychology, you're automatically talking about a mental disorder evaluation. This is the mental disorder. This is not school psych. School psychology, there's 13 diagnoses. 13. We're going to focus on the big black 5. No, I got more up here. Mental retardation, emotional disturbance, autism, other health impairment, or ADHD, and the specific learning disability. Now, there's 13 school psychology diagnoses. There's over 400 clinical. Now, ADHD is not a school special ed diagnosis. School psychology, special ed, that's the same thing. ADHD is not special ed. So you might say, well, why do you have it in parentheses? Because ADHD is a mental disorder. It comes out of this book. But according to special education law, if you get Raheem tested by the psychologist or psychiatrist outside the school, and they say he got ADHD or conduct disorder or opposition, any disorder, if you bring that report back to the school and say the doctor at the hospital said he got ADHD and I have it on paper, the school didn't diagnose it, somebody else did. But because the school now has that information, they can use it to put Raheem in special ed. So ADHD is not special ed, but if you make the school aware that he's diagnosed with it, they can use it to fuel their budget. Mental retardation. I'm telling you now, if any of your children are ever diagnosed as mentally retarded, you're going to fax me the report. I want to see it. My fax number is on my business card. You just fax it. Make sure your phone number is on it. Because the first thing I got to do is make sure they weren't misdiagnosed. Remember what I told you. Black and Latino boys, 4 times as likely as the white ones to be found to be retarded. You can only draw one conclusion from that. Excuse me, 2. Either black children are intellectually inferior to white ones, or something is wrong with this system. Now, first of all, if we're going to talk about mental retardation, we got to talk about the tests that determines it, right? The intelligence tests, and there's several of them that we give. Cognitive assessment. The Wechsler Intelligence Scale for children. You have the Wechsler Intelligence Scale for children, number 4. You have the Wechsler Preschool and Primary Scale of Intelligence. That should be WIPSI 3, WPPSI. Who do I give the WIPSI 3 to? Children who are 2.5 to 7.5 years old. Now you're saying, should I be getting my 2.5-year-old kid an IQ test? Hell no! Okay? You don't ever get no baby no IQ tests. It's crazy. Should I get my kindergartner an IQ test? Hell no! Unless it's for mental giftedness. If it's for mental giftedness, which we'll talk about in a minute, because not enough of our kids are being referred for gifted testing, and we're going to talk about the racist history behind that. Unless it's for gifted, you don't get the babies tested at all. If they are gifted, if you think they're gifted, you want to get them tested younger. Why? Because it's easier to hit the 130 IQ that we look for to determine gifted. So if your son is 6 and I test him at 6, he has a higher chance of hitting 130, which is very superior intelligence, at 6, as opposed to waiting until he's 12. Because now the items are more difficult. Are y'all following me? Yes. So with giftedness, the younger the better. If you're looking for retardation, the worst thing you can do is get them tested as babies. Why? Because the child's mind is constantly developing, constantly growing, constantly improving. So whatever IQ score they get today, they're not likely to get that next week. What they get next week, they're not likely to get next year. So if somebody's saying they thinking a 5-year-old is mentally retarded, doesn't mean they're wrong. But it means we need to hold off on making that decision. Why? Because the worst side effect about a diagnosis is what? The low self-esteem that it causes in the child. Which is why I hate when y'all get a label. Y'all run around like y'all hit the damn lottery. Bragging to your children that they got a problem. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Oh, John, he conduct disorder. Raheem, he ADHD. Susu, she ODD. You don't tell a child that they have a problem. You fix the problem. But when you give me the label, they take ownership of it. And so now, since you told me I'm ADHD, I'm going to act just like you. Now that you told me I have a conduct disorder, I'm going to act just like it. Because after all, these are medical problems, right? Allegedly. So since it's a medical problem, I can't be held responsible if I just get up and punch somebody in the face. I got a disorder. So now the children are acting crazy as hell because we told them they got a medical problem. So we treating ADHD, which is a professional opinion, like it's diabetes. We treating conduct disorder, a professional opinion, like it's epilepsy or heart disease. You can see heart disease. You can see cancer. You can prove epilepsy. Can you prove ADHD? No. Can you prove a learning disability? No. Can you prove mild mental retardation? No. Can you prove any emotional disturbance? No. The major labels that black and brown children are classified with cannot be proven to exist. It is an idea. It is an opinion. Sometimes it can be correct, but a lot of the times it's incorrect. And if your child is of color and they're being evaluated by someone who is not culturally competent, the risk of a misdiagnosis just went through the roof. "99% of all school psychologists in America are something other than African American and Latino." 99%. It is one of the most racially segregated professions in the country. If anybody's considering going back to school for something and you want to make a difference, consider getting your New York State cert in school psychology. 2 years of classes, a 1-year internship. You can intern under me if you can handle it. And you work, and you can work for yourself. The school psychologist is the only psychologist who can work in private practice without a doctorate and call themselves a psychologist. Unless you have a master's and was grandfathered in when they changed the law and required a PhD for license. We're the only ones. In fact, if I could live my life a few years over, instead of getting my doctorate degree in clinical psychology, I would have gotten a law degree. Consider becoming an educational attorney. An educational attorney. That's also only 3 years, and you make a whole lot more money than the school psychologist. 3 years. I don't know of a major African-American educational attorney in the United States. So when the rights of our children are being violated in the schools, I'm normally sending them to someone outside of the community. Why is that an issue for me? Because a lot of the educational attorneys who I work with are not interested in fixing the problem. They want to band-aid it to death, because as long as they band-aid it, they can hustle every case individually. Are y'all following me? Yeah. In other words, if you know this school is sending so many black boys to special ed, why not a class action lawsuit to crush the problem once and for all? Because if they do that, they crush the money machine. So what they do is they band-aid the cases without crushing the system that create the cases, because they want to keep on eating off of our damn kids. So even the people who fighting for the kids don't even care about the kids. And then you have the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale, 3rd edition. We might be up to 4 now. You give that to who? 17 and older. Why is that important for you to know? Because if you're trying to get one of your senior high school students tested for gifted, you better get them tested before their 17th birthday. Because the WIS 4 is going to be a whole lot easier than the WACE 4. Are y'all following me? Because you just went up another notch. So that means if I gave everybody in here an IQ test, you should all come within the average range, right? 90 to 109. Or 80 to 89, low average. 70 to 79 is borderline. And if you drop below that, we might got some issues. Go up the other way. 110 to 119, high average intelligence. 120 to 129, superior intelligence. And what are we looking for gifted? 130 and above. But if a black or brown child comes up with an IQ score of 125 instead of 130, if I'm testing them, they still getting in. Why? Because the IQ test by design is culturally biased against children of color. So his 125 is actually higher than the white kid's 130. Let's go deeper. Who invented the IQ concept? The intelligence quotient is an invention of Nazi Germany. You didn't hear me, so I'm going to say it again. The IQ comes from Hitler's Germany. A European scientist by the name of William Stern in 1913, the same year that Harriet Tubman passed away, and 1 year before Marcus Garvey gave us the largest black mass movement of all time, unequaled by any that came after it. 1913, William Stern came up with the intelligence quotient. He said you could put a number on how intelligent somebody is. Now, we know that that's nonsense, but it worked for the Nazis because they wasn't looking to see how smart you were. They just wanted to do what? Justify why they was going to kill. And for those of y'all who've seen Hidden Colors, you saw me break down how the IQ test came here. When Henry got it from New Jersey, brought it over from France, and they used the IQ test to fuel the eugenics movement. For example, how many of you knew that in America, 38 of the 50 states, 38 of the 50 states prevented you from getting married or having a child if your IQ score fell below a certain number? Whether you were black or white, you cannot have children and you cannot get married based on somebody's professional opinion. A test that came from Hitler said you wasn't smart enough. That's right. The intelligence test is a weapon of mass destruction. And let's be clear, every test that they give your child comes from eugenics. Who started the SAT test? The gentleman who started the SAT test was a member of the American Eugenics Society. David Wechsler, the most popular IQ test in the country. Who was he? A big racist. David Wechsler was a member of the American Eugenics Society. That's right. So when you see these IQ tests, Stanford Binet, that's racism. Woodcock Johnson, these are racist people who said black people was inferior. And now we're still giving our children the tests made by these people, even though they've been dead and gone for almost 100 years. Wow. The problem is we, the black psychologists, the Association of Black Psychologists, the Association of Black Psychiatrists, have to come up with our own tests for our children. Problem is too many of my colleagues don't want to do nothing but discuss spirituality. There's more to life than spirituality. That's a piece of it. But I don't care how spiritual you are. If you're hungry, you can't meditate correctly. If you ain't got a job, you won't be able to focus. If you don't know where you're going to sleep, prayer is secondary. We got to deal with world issues. And I take issue with any cultural nationalist who takes our history and turns it into another religion. Your history is not supposed to be a religion. It's supposed to be a motivating force that connects the past to the present so we can predict the future. Marcus Garvey and Frederick Douglass said history is only as good as it can point the way to the future. After that, it's useless, and if you spend too much time aggrandizing the past, maybe it's because you're afraid to deal with your present. I don't want to keep talking about history. I want to make history. We don't just want our children to talk about history. We want them to make it. We don't need another pyramid. So somebody could be at the top smoking weed on top of the pyramid.
And you know they will.
No, we ain't got no sense. These are the achievement tests we give. Wechsler Individual Achievement Test. I use that. Woodcock Johnson. All developed by non-Africans. Wide range achievement, early math diagnostic, Bracken basic concept scale, test of written language. 2 skills you need to work on well with your children. What are they? Reading comprehension and writing. This ain't just black children either, even the rich white kids who I evaluate. They can't write and they can't understand the written word. You have to work with them at home. Every house should have a set of encyclopedia. Everyone. You don't have to afford a new one. You go to the used shop and you can get a nice A to Z for $30. So don't tell me you can't afford it. Because I see he got on Air Jordans. I see he got an iPod, an Xbox.
Come on. Go down the list.
The problem is priorities, not money.
Yes.
Everybody in the hood got cable. And I ain't talking about basic either.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the $250 bill a month cable. Talking about I can't afford this. When I talk about building my school, people say, is the school going to be free? Because I can't afford. I guess not. You got a $600 truck, $400 insurance, $500 pocketbook with no money in it. Talking about you can't afford to pay for your child to come to my school. And I'm not going to lie to y'all. That's one of the biggest issues that I'm going to have to work through. You want to know why? Because the kids who need the school the most, their children will be the least inclined to pay for it. And my school isn't going to be based on capitalism. Okay? There's no profit motive in it. It's simply to educate, so the tuition will be the bare minimum. Now people say, why don't you just get some grants? It's $1 million grants! Why don't you become a charter? You can have charter schools with your name on it all over the country. You're absolutely right. But my question to you is what? When the mandatory homosexual curriculum hits Pennsylvania and New York and Jersey, what am I going to do then? I got a red, black, and green school, but now what? I'm going to be shut down if I don't introduce sexual studies into my curriculum. Then what will you think of Umar Johnson? You cannot bite the hand that feeds you. And white money will never liberate black people. What did Marcus Garvey say? One day at Garvey, I came to the provisional president of Africa and said, Mr. Garvey, there's a white philanthropist who wants to give the Universal Negro Improvement Association a large donation of money. What should you have me tell him? Mr. Garvey said, tell him to keep his money. This is a black man's movement. And then the Garveyites looked at him. They said, what are you doing? You know what we can do with that type of money? Marcus Garvey said that what is to be done for black people must be done by black people.
All right.
And that European philanthropy within black organizations is a cancer that eats up our ability to do for ourselves. Wow. When Marcus Garvey and W.E.B. Du Bois was going through their differences, W.E.B. Du Bois poked fun at Mr. Garvey. He said, look at him. the provisional president of Africa with a half-finished church as his international headquarters. And what did Mr. Garvey say in response to the boy, the first Cablinasian in history? He said, I would rather own a half-finished church that is mine than to be working downtown Manhattan in a high-rise paid for by Europeans. We got to go back to do for ourselves. That's not to demonize anyone who's getting funding for what you do. Use it as far as you can go. But know there becomes a time when what? You're going to have to stand on your own 2 feet. Okay? Visual motor assessments. This is when we evaluate a child to see whether or not they got any hand motor problems. Some children can't tie, they can't button, they can't fasten. When they write, they hold the pencil like this, like in a fist. When they hold the fork and the spoon, it's like in a fist. They have fine motor issues. Those children have a right to what? Occupational therapy. Okay? If you got a kid with Freddy Krueger syndrome, get him to therapy. Stop waiting. Some of y'all got 3 and 4-year-old kids and you see something going on wrong. Get the help now. What do we call it? Early intervention. Every child in America who is at least 3 years old has a right to special support free to you. All you got to do is let the hospital or local school district know. They get an early intervention eval. They'll get their speech therapy when it can still reverse the problem. They'll get their occupational therapy. They can get their special ed. The problem is what? We don't want to admit anything wrong with our children. And don't get me wrong, nobody wants that. But if you see it, you can only help that child by getting them the help early as opposed to hurting them and making them think the problem ain't there. You got a son walking around hanging every animal he sees. Great, get that boy some therapy. Some of our kids is off too. Don't get it twisted. Some of them kids I'm scared of. One boy came in the room, sat down and tested this little guy. He started looking in my eyes like, how was your day? I said, you know what? Take your ass back to class. I got to go. I got to go. Okay? Because you're not going to get to cutting me up in here. Okay? Take the flag. Take the flag, brother. Take the flag. Get them the help early, y'all. Get them the help early. They don't automatically go to special ed in kindergarten. What happens right before they start kindergarten, the psychologist comes back out and we got to test them again to see if they still need special ed. Because a lot of parents of preschoolers say, I don't want my child in kindergarten that young, in special ed that young. I agree. That's why they get retested before kindergarten, this summer right now. So if you got a kid who is in early intervention right now, we'll be testing them to see if they need special ed in September. So they don't automatically go. Get them the help now. Don't wait. Going back to my board. Mental retardation, I'm going to fax me the report. Any child with an IQ score less than 70 is at risk of being classified as retarded if there's proof that that child has an adaptive impairment. What is an adaptive impairment? That means if I evaluate this sister, let's say she's in school, and her IQ score is at 69, it's less than 70. Can I say she's retarded? No, unless I have proof that she can't function as well as all her other classmates in some area. In other words, her communication skills are okay. Her self-help skills are okay. Her community navigation skills are okay. I'm looking for adaptive behavior because that's what intelligence is, your ability to adapt. So if I don't see anything different from her compared to her classmate, I can't say she's retarded even if the IQ score is low. Listen to me. If somebody says your child is mild mentally retarded, if he's that mild, if she's that mild, how do you know she's retarded at all? Do y'all see that? So whenever you see MMR, fax me the report, emotional disturbance, stay away from that. How do you know if the school is trying to diagnose your child with emotional disturbance? How do you know? This is what they're going to tell you. We want to test him for behavior. Listen to me. I'm telling you how they roll. I work with them. We want to test them for behavior. First thing you should say to yourself is what? Special education only has one label that deals with behavior: emotional disturbance. So if the school, any school, tells you that we want to test for behavior, you automatically know what? They want to diagnose my son as emotionally disturbed. Remember, all the behavior labels come out of clinical psych, not school psych. The only school psych label that deal with behavior is emotionally disturbed. So if they say they want to test them for behavior, you know what they're going to slap you with. Listen to me. Listen. Before your child is tested, they already know what they're going to say is wrong with them. Did y'all hear what I said?
Yeah.
Did y'all hear what I said?
Yeah.
Do you really think they sit down and give your son all these tests and then say, wow, he's fine? Hell no. The principal and the teacher had already got together, and the teacher said, I want him out my class, and I knew of a case where the school psychologist was dating the referral teacher. This is what goes, I want you to know. So the boyfriend looked out for his girlfriend and said the kid had a reading disability who didn't. But I told the mother what happened. And what can you do if your child is ever tested by the school and diagnosed and you don't agree? What is your recourse? Remember, special ed is a federal law. Special ed is a federal law. What is your recourse? You have a right to this right here. And don't you forget it. Independent educational evaluation. You write that down. You need to know that. Independent educational evaluation. That's when you write a letter to the principal and say, I received the evaluation. I do not agree. I said my son was retarded or learning disabled or autistic or emotionally disturbed. I don't agree. I have a federal and a state right to an independent educational evaluation by a school psychologist of my choice. Once I have received your acknowledgement of my letter, I will furnish you with the name of the psychologist that I have chosen. Now you're looking at me. The problem is, even though I'm nationally certified, and New York accepts the national cert, they still want a turnaround cert, which means I got to send my credentials in to the New York State Teacher School Psych Licensor Board. And then they send me one of y'all pieces of paper, and then I can come to Long Beach and test your children.
All right.
Problem is, every time I come to New York, and it's my first time in Long Beach, so y'all off the hook, I always ask for somebody who works in the State Department of Ed or for the State Department of Ed who can find out who I need to talk to send my paperwork in so I can get that turnaround cert. So if you ever need me to come down here and do an independent educational eval, I can do it.
Right.
But nobody has given me the information yet. And I'm too busy to look for it on my own. So if any of y'all got some children who you know sooner or later gonna be in some stuff, find the information and get it to me so I can have the paperwork and be ready. Are y'all feeling it?
Yes.
All right. Is y'all gonna wait? Or y'all gonna call me and I'm gonna say I can't do it because I ain't got the paper? Get the paper. Monday.
Send up the smoke signal.
All right, send up a smoke signal. Burn some reef. Let me stop. Next time I come back, I'm gonna do my for sisters only relationships and dating seminar.
All right. Yes.
And I have my for brothers only relationships and dating seminar.
All right. All right.
Okay. We could do them on the same day. Okay. 3 hours with the brothers and 3 hours with the sisters.
All right.
Okay.
You might come to Philly for that.
Okay, we can do it. Now, here's the thing about emotional disturbance. It's the most stigmatizing label of them all. Think about it. Would you rather your son be called ADHD, conduct disorder, oppositional defiant disorder, or emotionally disturbed? You don't know what it means, but you know you don't want it in your class. So I want you to keep that label off our boys. Then autism. Let's talk about autism. Autism is not mental retardation. But if you got an autistic kid, you better be watching because the schools are putting the autistic kids in the classrooms for the retarded kids because they don't think you know no better. Autism has nothing to do with intelligence. Autism is about communication. A child who is autistic might be gifted. They might have average intelligence. They can be MR, but it has nothing to do with it. An autistic child is a child who has trouble communicating verbally or non-verbally. What do I mean by non-verbal? Social communication. If she's angry at me, she'll give me a face, right? The average child knows that when an adult gives you that look, you back off. Autistic kid don't know. They'll just keep on doing what they're doing, run over your foot with the shopping cart. Because they don't know. They can't read nonverbal communication. Autistic kid is a kid who's over here playing by himself. All the kids in the rec center come over here and start playing with him. And guess what? They still playing by themselves. Other kids try to talk to them. They don't want to be popular. Autistic kid is a kid who does what? Can be totally infatuated with something that most kids get bored with. You can sit an autistic kid in that corner, give him this marker, and he will be totally amazed with this marker for 10 hours. Okay? They the best kids to babysit. They don't need nothing. I need to stop because I won't get me going. Okay? Also, autistic children get fixated on things. They want the same spoon for breakfast every morning. The same socks every day. The same movie. You take an autistic kid to the theater, they're going to want to stay and watch Batman Returns all night. You say, baby, let's go over here and watch overnight. No! And they'll be loud with you. No! Okay? They need the same thing over and over. They do a lot of flickering at the lights, flickering with their fingers, real repetitive types of stuff, okay? So, again, if they're young and you see the autistic-y, the child ain't talking yet, well, they making like Frankenstein noises, and they should be saying at least daddy and mom, take them to the psych, okay? If you sound like a grizzly bear, take them, nah, something ain't right. We want to test them. Now we need to test, okay? Learning disability. 8 types. 8 of them, y'all. 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8. What's the first one? Basic reading skill. Can the child read? Can they decode words? What's the next one? Reading fluency. Can they read as smoothly as they talk? RF, reading fluency. Your child might can decode, but if they can't read smoothly, there's a gap between the decoding and the fluency. Is everybody with me? Okay? Doesn't mean they have a disability. It might just mean they need more practice. Stop looking for the label. Work with the kids. What did Bill Clinton find? Your first black president. What'd he say? He had a commission on excellence in education. Bill Clinton said that at least half the black kids in special ed in America, this is coming from the president. He said at least half the black kids in America who were in special ed didn't need it. And all they needed was early reading and math intervention. That's what the president said. He said the same thing I said. We're not friends or nothing, but what's the third one? Reading comprehension. Can your child understand the written word? Some of y'all children are speed readers, right? Zoom, zoom, zoom. I'm done. Zoom, zoom. What was the moral of the story? I don't know. Let me ask you some context questions. Why did Jane go to the store before she went back home? I don't know. Because y'all worship your children when they read fast, even though they can't understand nothing they read. And then when they take the New York State assessments, the scores are low, not because they couldn't get the questions right. They couldn't understand them to answer them correctly. Do y'all see that? Y'all got to work with them at home. Turn off the TV in your house every night, Saturday and Sunday included. There should be at least 1 hour of study hour.
All right.
If you have no homework, you take out a book. Y'all have to build that in them, y'all, because when they get to college and trade school, they don't have the discipline to do work. They don't have the discipline to do work because you never made them. There was never no homework time at home. They did homework at football practice. They did homework on the bus. They did homework in the after-school program. No, homework at home. TV off, computer off. Tell them turn the cell phones off, yours too. And make them get that study on. If they don't master it now, when they get to college, when you ain't around, they won't be able to do it. And that's why a lot of our black males are flunking out of college. It's not because they can't do the work. They don't have the discipline. Your first job as a parent is to do what? Teach your child discipline, which is the ability to make yourself do what needs to be done when it has to be done, whether you feel like it or not.
All right.
Woo! In other words, game 7 on the night, right? The Heat and the Celtics. Some of y'all needed this message. Y'all came because y'all had discipline. Y'all said this is a priority over that. But I bet you y'all all know 5 parents who should have had their ass right here.
Sure do.
And in here,
Sure
because they
do.
want to see
Yeah.
LeBron.
That's it.
Forget about John. I want to see LeBron. I can't stand the ghetto ass parent.
Come on now.
Then you got math calculations. Can the child add, subtract, divide, and multiply? Can they add, subtract, divide, and multiply? Right? Next. Math reasoning. Can the child determine the operation and complete it? That's a word problem. Then you have listening comprehension. Can they understand what they hear? Oral expression, can they speak? And written expression, can they write? Now, what didn't I put up here? The other 7. See, these are the big black 5. They're also the most what? Subjective. All opinions, y'all see that? Who's likely to get misdiagnosed with autism? Now, autism is a real disorder, but guess who gets misdiagnosed with it? Children with hearing problems, children with social anxiety, children who are selective mutes, and children who still got those ear tubes stuck in their ear from when they was 3. You never got them taken out. And so now they can't hear out of one ear, and people thinking they're autistic. I had a kid like that. I'm sitting in front of his face, and he couldn't hear a word I said. I said, you know what? Something wrong with this boy. He can't hear. And mother said, you don't want to test him. You don't want to test him. I said, no, I'm not going to test him because I think the boy can't hear. Went to the audiologist, Temple University in Philadelphia. They did the scan, found out he had an ear tube stuck in his ear. They had to cut the canal, pull it out, all that nasty juice came out. Okay? Sewed him back up. He came to school. He was fine. No learning disability, nothing. The problem was an old ear tube, trifling and parents.
All right. Wow.
Now the other ones are what? Blind children, deaf children, children with traumatic brain injury. Make sure the children got the seatbelts on. If they're learning how to ride their bike, I still want some type of helmet on. Because if they hit that concrete, that little brain will start shaking, and it look like everything fine, and 3 years later, they slobbering when they talk, forgetting they sentence midstream, can't walk in a straight line without tripping, falling down the steps. Neurological problems. You thought it was okay to hit their head a little once in a while. No, it's not. The brain doesn't stop growing until you are 13 years old. So if you let them little kids shake that brain up like that, that young, you can cause neurological problems. Orthopedic impairment, what is that? Skeletal muscular problems. You have a child who has a skeletal muscular dystrophy, multiple sclerosis. Okay? I had a kid who had a disease where his joints would, let me say this correctly. He would bleed in his joints. Woo! He had to go to the nurse like 4 times a day to get the blood out of his joints. And come to find out, I think he had a family history of this particular disease. He would be diagnosed with other health impairment. When we have children with each other, we got to study the history a little bit better, y'all. We got to study the history, know who you lay it down with. Biologically and psychologically. Because you don't know who in that tree might be off.
All right, there you go.
Remember now, in the African tradition, we are all what? An ancestor reincarnated. Everybody here. And you come from one side or the other. You are either reincarnated from your mother's lineage or you are reincarnated from your father's lineage. Everybody here. So you got to know who was in them damn trees. Because you don't want the wrong grandfather coming back. Son come out with one eye and the axe. Okay? Oh, that's my great-great-grandpa Johnny. He like to cut people up. Put him back up. Then you have blind and deaf children together, children with multiple disabilities, speech and language. Speech and language. If a child has a speech and language problem, do they go to special ed? They don't go to a class. It's a special ed program, which means what? The school gets money, but they don't go to a class. They get a speech therapist. Speech therapist. If your child is stuttering, they talking with a list, whatever the issue is, make sure they get their speech therapy. Because I'm going to tell you, some speech therapists are lazy. I know because I work with them. They'll write up the note like they saw your kid and never saw him. So now your child been in special ed for speech 5 years and he's still stuttering. Guess what? He ain't been getting the help. And you know what you're going to do? You're going to ask for an independent educational speech eval. And you're going to find a speech therapist to test your child, and they're going to say that he's been getting this service for this long. He should be talking a little bit better than that. Then guess what? You're going to have a right to make the school district pay for you to get outside private speech therapy. And if your child is in special ed, if you can prove that the child is not benefiting from it, stay with me. Some of y'all children are already in. Now let's make it work for them if they're already in. First of all, if you don't think they need it, pull them out. But let's say you think they do need it. If the school ain't teaching your child, according to special ed law, you can make the school pay for your child to go to an APS, approved private school. We're talking about the $30,000, that's right. I know parents who kids go to $30,000 a year in schools because they was able to prove that my child been in this Long Beach public schools for 5 years, been in special ed for 5 years, and still reading right where they were when they got put in. But you got to document. Your problem is y'all don't document. Document those meetings. Document those phone calls. Remember, if it wasn't in writing, it never happened. Every time you have a conversation with a teacher, NTA, disciplinarian, principal, psychologist, what should you do? Follow up with a letter or email. Based on our conversation today, you told me that my son really didn't have a problem at all, that you just simply think he didn't get good instruction last year. Whatever they say, good or bad, write it down. So if you ever got to take the school district to due process, because you don't need a lawyer for special ed, that's the good thing. Special ed law says the parents can fight for their own children without an attorney. So the question becomes, why so many black kids in special ed if they ain't got to be? Because we don't fight for our children. 2 million black children in special ed, 2 million black people in jail, you do the math. You do the math. And why are so many young African American and Latino kids spending so much time in juvie hall? Because the schools are sending them. Also, and y'all can tell me if this is true for Long Beach, they put street cops in the high schools. Y'all got street cops in y'all's yet?
No.
Y'all still just got regular district police, right?
No, they're not in.
Y'all got some cops assigned to the school. Every school has cops. That's required as a result of Columbine. So y'all probably got regular school officers, probably just a couple.
Yeah.
But in the big cities like New York, they got street cops in the school. So guess what happens? Let's say I get into a fight. Normally, getting into a fight would earn me a what? 3-day suspension, right? Yeah. But there's a street cop on site. So guess what he's going to do? He's going to take jurisdiction away from the principal, who is just going to suspend me, and instead he's going to lock me up. Now I'm going to juvie hall for something that should only been a 3-day suspension. That's why we got to get them cops out the schools. They are trained to police criminals on the street. They are not trained to police children. One of the worst things we did was go for that. And the irony about cops in schools is what? All that came from Columbine, which was not a black incident. But the rules that were created as a result of Columbine disproportionately affect who? The black children. That's the zero tolerance. Zero tolerance. Weapons, drugs, serious bodily injury, and of course I can understand the weapons. Okay? But a lot of black children are being expelled because they come into school with Boy Scout knives that they didn't even know was weapons. Kids who've never been suspended a day in their life. But they got something that looks like it can be used as a weapon. It just looks like it. You say, do you think it's going to hurt nobody? I don't think so. But under zero tolerance law, the principal no longer has, what? Jurisdiction over how she's going to deal with it. If he came in there with a Boy Scout knife, guess what? Straight A kid, honor roll, he's getting kicked out forever because of that Boy Scout knife. Now don't get me wrong, we got to be strict against weapons. But if you got a kid who you know did not bring a weapon in, and you simply construe it as a weapon, you got to let that ride. They are criminalizing our children. See, in the psychoacademic ward is what? 5 stages against black boys. Miseducation. Teach him to hate himself and to love other cultures. Psychiatric drugs. To do what? Induce chemical dependence on our children. And the crazy thing about the drugs, they are no different than the illegal street drugs. That's the crazy thing about this whole thing, y'all. Ritalin, methylphenidate, the #1 selling anti-stimulant in the world, according to the Drug Enforcement Agency of the United States federal government. Methylphenidate is a Schedule II drug. It's in the same category as cocaine. As cocaine. Because you know all the illegal drugs were once legal. You do know that. Opium was legal. Heroin was legal. Cocaine was legal. Marijuana was legal. Everything they locking black men up for was once legal. They criminalized it to fill up the jails with us. Remember, at the end of slavery, most prisons were full of white males. Today, they're full of black males. How did that get flipped? 3 steps. #1, during Reconstruction, they upgraded petty offenses to what? felonies. They made vagrancy offenses felonies. So black men had to steal to feed their family because none of the labor unions would let us in. So instead of that being a regular vagrancy misdemeanor, it became a felony. Now you on the chain gang for stealing some beans so your family can. So they upgrade petty offenses to major ones. Then they did what? Systematically function on crimes that tend to be committed by black people to the exclusion of others. Let me give you an example. If you want to turn the prisons all white in America today, all you have to do is make drunk driving a mandatory felony punishable by minimum sentence. Are y'all following me? Because most drunk drivers in America are white males. So if you want to turn the prisons white, you make drunk driving. Anytime you got caught drunk driving, because you can kill somebody, right? You go to jail for 5 years minimum. They don't do it. Why? Because all the crimes are color-coded. And they know that most of the drunk driving is being done by the white male, so that will never become mandatory. But what we're going to do is say if we catch you with some crack, which we know is color-coded for black people, we're going to put you in for 5 years. And then Obama and Eric Holder, they reduced the discrepancy just a little bit, and black people clapping like hell. So you still go to jail more for selling crack than selling powder, but it's a little better now. So let's celebrate. We got a bad habit of celebrating stuff that ain't nothing to celebrate, y'all. Make no sense. But with juvenile crime, let me go back to my point. With juvenile crime, what happened in 1980, 1990? The Federal Anti-Violence Initiative. That's when eugenics came back. And they said black boys have a gene that makes them violent. Black men have a gene that make them kill each other. So then they say, yeah. They said, well, with juvenile incarceration, we normally try to do what? Rehabilitate the child and put them back in society. That's juvenile. That's why they don't call juvenile offenders criminals. They call them juvenile offenders. Because we don't want to criminalize a child. Except the blacks, right? So when 1980 hit and they start saying black men had a gene that made us violent, they said, why are we trying to rehabilitate black boys? They born to kill. They born to sell drugs. They born to make babies they're not going to take care of. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to lock them up and throw away the key. And that's why so many states now have what? Adult sentences for children. That was done for us. Those who they say are uncorrectable. Nobody want to talk about the fact that the prisons make worse criminals out of the kids than when they got in there.
That's right, they do.
It's an incubator for violence. What should you do if you ever suspect your child is suicidal? Take them to wherever your mental health crisis center. In Long Beach, where do y'all go for mental health emergencies? Do y'all go to the regular hospital? Do y'all have a separate hospital or agency? Do y'all have a mobile unit? What do y'all have?
Regular hospital.
Regular hospital.
Yes.
Okay, listen to me. Suicide for black boys has went up 800% since 1980. They are killing them, Hispanic boys too, killing themselves like crazy. You don't see it on the news because that's not a threat to the suburbs.
That's right.
Or y'all follow me? You never hear suicide reported on the news. Why? Somebody gets shot, it's on the news.
Yeah.
There was a shootout, it's on the news. They love to show you that. But why when our children take their own life, that's not newsworthy? Because nobody cares about the black child killing himself. They only care about the black child posing threat to people in other neighborhoods. But I want y'all to know that suicide is nothing to play with. You know a child, and that child said they think about hurting themselves, take them to the hospital. Don't take a chance. I've seen too many lives get lost because we thought we knew better and didn't. I had a case the other day where I had to get on a charter school principal because I evaluated a girl and she said she thought about killing herself but would not do it. And I said she got to get it evaluated, and the parents came in there and we got into an argument because the parents was upset that I put in the report that the child is possibly suicidal and need to be evaluated. I said, what would y'all want me to do? Not put it in my report? Well, you could have called us. You read it when you get the report. Take the child to get the suicide assessment, or you want me to call Child Protective Services on your way. And we knew about it and didn't do nothing about it because we thought they was joking around.
Yes.
I was once the psychologist at a major high school in Philadelphia that's now closed. 4 black boys killed themselves. Or was it 3? 3 or 4 committed suicide successfully the same school year. One killed himself because his girlfriend got an abortion and he wanted the baby. Another one killed himself because he got bullied so much in school he couldn't take it. Y'all got to watch the bullying, especially with elementary and middle school kids. They are attempting suicide because they're being picked on too much by their peers. And guess what I'm finding out? Teachers and principals are not taking bullying serious enough. They are wiping it off like it's nothing to be concerned about. Get on them. What does No Child Left Behind say? No Child Left Behind says that if your child goes to a school that you feel is physically unsafe, they have a right to be transferred to another. Start using them laws to protect your child. What's another law you need to use? The FERPA, 1974. What is that? Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. FERPA, 1974. Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. You need to write that down. What is that? That's your right to get a copy of everything in that school with your child's name on it. You have a right, full record, special ed record, discipline record, student pocket. When should you get a full copy of your child's record? At least once every 3 years, and definitely before they transfer to a new school. Why before they transfer to a new school? Because if your son is in the 5th grade and he's applying to a middle school that starts in the 6th grade, and he applied and they rejected him because they saw the pocket and he had some discipline write-ups that they thought was a bit intense, it's too late. You want that record. You want to clean it up before he transfers to another school. Some of your children are going to be denied what? Admission to certain schools because of the documentation in the record that makes them look like they're worse than what they are. You need to know what's in that pocket. Remember, the teachers are putting stuff in there every day. You need to see what that is. And what if you see something in the record that you don't agree with? There's something in there, you don't want it in there because that negatively reflects on my son's character. You have a right to petition the district to take it out. Every school district by law has an officer whose job is to review parent complaints concerning paperwork that they don't want, and you can get those paperwork removed. That's right. Hey, teachers can get theirs removed. You can get yours removed too. That's right. Nothing they say about your child, no matter how nasty it is, you get that out of there. You don't let that stuff stand in there and stigmatize them children. These are the learning disabilities. We just went over. This is special ed right here. Remember, there's only 13 special education labels. 400 clinical disorders. That is school psychology. Special ed is school psychology. The DSM is what? Clinical psychology. Make sure you know that there's a difference there. I'm going to stop on this slide and switch to another, but I want y'all to grab these 4 words right here. When I test for those 13 disabilities, I cannot diagnose them unless what? I see proof that the problem that you're getting me to test for adversely affects that child's educational performance. Remember those 4 words. Somebody wants your child tested. Your first question is, where is the adverse effect on educational performance? Your son has a C in math. You want him tested for a math disability. For what? Well, he got a B in everything else. Okay, well, maybe he's not studied enough. Maybe he needs to work a little harder. But you want me to say that he's learning disabled in math because his math score is a little lower than the reading score? Maybe you have the learning disability. Or put a kid in special ed because this score is lower than the others. You go in there only because you got a learning disability, which must be substantiated by an adverse effect on educational performance. Now, he got a D, he got an F. Obviously, there's an adverse effect. Now, let's talk about ADHD and whether or not a child should go to special ed for ADHD. 3 ADHD kids, 1, 2, and 3, right? First kid is straight A's and B's. He has an ADHD diagnosis outside the school. Does he go to special ed? No. Why? Because there's no adverse effect. He got ADHD, but his grades are fine. He goes to class. The next kid, he got ADHD, and he's failing because of the ADHD. Does he go to special ed? Yeah. Why? Because there's an adverse effect on his grades. He's about to repeat. Third kid, his grades are okay. He's not failing, but his behavior is a major problem in the school. What do you do when your child do not need special ed, but is a behavior problem? Do not need special ed, but is a behavior problem and does have an outside diagnosis of ADHD, CD, or ODD, you're going to ask for a 504 plan. Don't you forget this. This is how you keep a kid with behavior problems out of special ed and still get them the help they need. It's called a 504 plan. For those of y'all with badass boys, I hope you wrote it down. 504 plan says what? If a child has a disabling condition that can affect his ability to receive his education, he has a right to meaningful accommodations in school so he can learn. So do you know what that means? Your son don't have to go to special ed to get extra time on tests. He can get that with a 504. You don't have to go to special ed to get a 1-to-1 aid. He can get that with a 504. He don't have to go to special ed to get counseling. He can get that with a 504. He don't have to go to special ed to get regular breaks from class. He can get that with a 504 plan. So your next question is what? If he can get all of that with a 504 instead of special ed, why do the schools push special ed? Because when he goes to special ed, they get money. But when he gets a 504 plan, they do not. So the schools don't even mention 504 to you because they don't get no Obama bucks for it. Everybody with me?
Absolutely.
I'm going to run through one more with y'all, and then we're going to do Q&A. We good?
Oh, yeah.
Everybody all right? Okay, y'all ain't got the itis yet, right? I know y'all been eating. Is the itis in here? Okay. Psychology. We talked about these two labels earlier. Drapetomania and nigritude. Drapetomania and nigritude. How they used to diagnose slaves with these disorders. Freedom was a disease. Black skin was a disease. ADHD is the new nigritude. Conduct disorder is the new drapetomania. What is the number one goal of public education for the black boy? What's the number one goal? To break his spirit and make sure he understands who's in control. If only 1 out of every 4 black boys is getting a diploma, what's the purpose of education? They're not learning. They're learning one thing, that white people are in charge. And there's nothing I can do about it. That's the whole goal. And if you have a problem accepting that they're in charge, that's where you get put on drugs. Listen to me now. Effeminate black boys are not diagnosed with conduct disorder. Effeminate black boys are not diagnosed with oppositional defiant. You never see effeminate boys diagnosed with these problems because these are labels that they give to the strong black boys to break them down. I know because I worked with them. Insanity. During Reconstruction, black people used to be diagnosed with insanity. If you tried to fight for the right to vote, for equality, if you tried to fight to liberate slaves, insanity was actually a diagnosis. It's not anymore, but it was. Although someone can still be insane for court purposes. But as a formal diagnosis, they used to use that on black freedom fights. They would call us insane and lock us up to keep us out of the freedom struggle. Psychology is a weapon. Stop using it as a friend. Psychology is a weapon. Stop using it as a friend. Psychological incarceration. I mentioned to you earlier that in most states you can go to jail for failure to take your brain medication. And if there's any women in here nursing or expecting a baby, you will not give that child Similac or Isomil. We don't do machine milk because God gave y'all milk. We're not going to do machine milk. Why are we not going to do machine milk? Because some of y'all looking like I'm crazy. Who you to tell me I can't get my baby machine milk? Because the machine milk is making them crazy. That's why I'm telling you that. Okay? How do we know this? Isomil, Similac and Depakote, brain drug. Similac and Depakote are both made by a psychopharmacological company called Abbott Laboratories. You mean to tell me you're giving your child milk that's made from a brain drug company? You out your mind. You out your mind. The same company that makes Depakote is making Similac, and y'all giving it to your children. The Similac ain't nothing but a drug. It's liquid crack. That's why the kids keep on crying. That's why you got to keep on feeding them the machine milk. You give them breast milk, they cool. You give them machine milk, they got to drink it all day. You know why? Because it's a drug. That's why we got an incidence of what? Obese black babies. You see them there? They all look like black Michelin men. Okay? You know why? You know why? Because they always hungry, and you keep on feeding them. Nobody's telling you what. The reason they crying is because they want the drugs that's in the milk, not the milk itself. We making crack addicts straight out of the womb, y'all. Because we got better things to do. I ain't got time to be nursing no baby. I got to go to work. I got to do this. I got to do that. On every psychological index, breastfed babies do better. They live longer, they're healthier, less depression, less suicide, less chemical death. If you just follow what God gave you and stop remixing it what other people want to give you, you'll be okay. I'm going to go even deeper. I'm going to give you a little homework assignment. I want you to go get you a can of Similac or Isomil. And then I want you to go to the computer and I want you to look up every ingredient in the milk. And I want you to look up the side effects of every chemical in the milk. There are drugs all in the milk, and some of the ingredients that go in the breast formula are ingredients that they use in formaldehyde and also other types of electronic products that they make. Look up the chemicals if you don't believe it. And you giving this to an infant? They didn't ask to come here. You want to kill them with kitty crack. Similac is liquid crack for infants. And for the woman, you want to breastfeed anyway because it's better for your body. It's better for everybody. What's the biggest difference between the black community here and the black community back home in Africa? In Africa, the children and the elders are the center of village life. Everything is based on what's in the best interest of our children. And in America, as soon as we have them, we're looking for somebody to drop them off to. They are a burden to us and a blessing on the continent. And we got to change that. The reason why children run around the streets crazy is because we have neglected them. I was at a meeting about a mentorship program in Philadelphia. We was talking about assigning every black boy in Philadelphia who didn't have a father a mentor. Guess what some Negro says? Is there any grant money out there? Why do you need grant money to spend 2 hours a week with a black kid? Why do you need to be paid for that? And sisters, y'all not doing right by the young girls either. Y'all don't mentor the teenage girls. See, the 70 and 80-year-old queen mothers should be mentoring the 50s and 60s. The 50s and 60s should be mentoring the 30s and 40s. That's right, the 30s and 40s should be mentoring the 20s and the teens. Where's the mentorship amongst the women? Now, the fellas, we got to work on mentorship for the boys, but at least you got some. How many mentorship programs you see for women with girls? Because that intense competition amongst black women, y'all got to work it out. It makes no sense for a 38-year-old girl to be competing, 38-year-old woman to be competing with the body shape of an 18-year-old girl. You'll never look like that again. You'll never look like that again. Accepted him. I'm not trying to compete with a 17-year-old boy coming out of football camp chiseled up. I'm gonna be his mentor. But y'all look, she thinks she cute. She thinks she cute. Her behind bigger than mine. She's smelling us up. She thinks she cute. So y'all don't spend no time with the young sisters. So you know what they do? They get lonely. And when they get lonely, they get pregnant. Teenage pregnancy is an epidemic in our community. It's a cycle. Because if the child still needs emotional nourishment and they have a child, that child is going to get what they want because she ain't got what she needed yet. So that child grows up and guess what? She got a baby. She got a baby. I met the other day a 38-year-old grandmother. I met a 38-year-old grandmother the other day, black people. We got to stop this. Schizophrenia, we talked about that, anti-spirituality. We got to get back to who we are as a people. White psychology can save black people because white psychology doesn't deal with the spirit. They refuse to acknowledge the existence of the spirit. Sigmund Freud said there was a spirit because remember, he went to Africa and stole his old idea. See, they steal everything. Carl Jung went to Africa, he stole. Sigmund Freud went to Africa, he stole. His whole psychoanalysis is African spirituality. How the unseen dictates the seen. He stole that. Okay? We got to get back to being a spirited people, and in the spirit world, we are all one. All of us collectively make up one soul. When one hurts, everybody hurts. We got to get back to our oneness. Black people have become too selfish. We are too selfish. It makes no sense that we gross $1 trillion every year in the American economic order, and we don't own nothing.
Not a damn thing.
Where are your supermarkets? Where's your airlines? Where's your factories? Where's your jobs for your children? Where do you grow your food at? Where's your distribution network? We own nothing with all this money. We're the richest group of Africans on the face of the world. There's people in Korea who ain't never been to the ghetto, but can't wait to get to it because their friends told them that you can get rich off the black dollar. And you ain't even got to speak Ebonics. We got to do something about that. All the nails we get done, why we don't own our own nail salons? Come on now. Insane! Adam Clayton Powell. Had tremendous respect for him. I think he's the greatest black politician we had. His breadbasket campaign, if I can't work there, I don't shop there. Whatever happened to that?
Right.
You won't see me if I don't see something looking like me inside here.
That's it.
Come on, y'all, we
Like
let people take our money and run off. We done made millionaires out of everybody in America except ourselves. The black dollar, the easiest dollar to get, it don't make no sense. We can solve all our problems ourselves. We can build schools for every child. Do you know without Christmas money, you can take your Christmas money and build an independent school for every black kid in Long Beach just on your Christmas money. We spend billions on Christmas. Billions on the 4th of July, and that ain't even our day.
Nope.
July 4th, 1776, you was a damn slave.
Yeah, thank you.
What is wrong with you? Y'all can't wait till 4th of July come. You put your red, white, and blue Hulk Hogan bandana on,
Not me.
your Thomas Jefferson t-shirt. We're going to talk about the fact he owned 200 slaves. It was a child molester. Sally Hemings molested her since she was 12. We ain't going to talk about that. Put your George Washington on. He owned 200 slaves. Used to get the teeth taken out of his slave's mouth and put in his before there was anything such as oral surgery. And you running around celebrating 4th of July. Make me sick. We didn't get freedom till December 1865. That's almost 100 years longer, and you celebrating their freedom from Britain. You're celebrating their freedom from Britain. What about your freedom from here? We ain't even had an Independence Day yet. This why I ain't been on Oprah yet. I'm gonna talk about her to her face. Everywhere I go, you ain't been on Oprah? She would eat you alive. Yeah,
Right, you want to eat her alive.
Tavis. I was on Tom Joyner for about 5 minutes. Okay, folks, we're gonna take a break and we'll get right back. Tom, I was only on here like 2 minutes, Tom. Hey, Umar, we'll bring you back again, and we're gonna talk some more to America's top school psychologist, Umar Johnson. They know when I'm coming on there. You can count the seconds. So when I miss a word black, all right then. Let's see who's the lucky winner today. 3-time joining t-shirt. They control them airways. I was on the Bev Smith show. Same thing. Yeah. But sooner or later, they're going to have to deal with me, though. You can't keep skating. Because ain't nobody else pushing the truth out there. Everybody's skating. See, most of my colleagues, they making money off of this stuff. That's why you don't see them doing this. That's right. They get paid putting your kid in special. They get paid saying he got ADHD. They hustling. Mental giftedness. Mental giftedness was a strategy that was started in 1954 to resegregate black children from white children. As you know, in 1954, the Brown versus Board of Education decision said you can no longer use race. So they said, we're going to use mental giftedness. They started taking the white kids out the class again. Not because they were white, but because they were too smart to be in the class with the black kids. In Long Beach, I'm willing to bet, you have way more black kids in special ed than you have in the gifted program.
Yes, of course.
That's by design.
Yes.
That's by design. And if you notice, I didn't put giftedness on that list. Why? Because a couple years ago, the federal government took mental giftedness out of the special ed register. What does that mean? That means that they don't get money for diagnosing the black kids that's smart anymore. Which means what? Nobody's looking for the smart black and Latino kids because they don't get paid. But guess what? Giftedness is still the law. It's the state law. And if you got a child who you think is gifted, they got the test scores, they got the grades, you write a letter to their principal, I'm requesting that my child be evaluated for the gifted and talented program. They have to test your child. They're not going to want to because they don't get no money for it, but it's the law. Don't forget that. And if they fall a couple points short, they do this, you know. 127. He didn't make it. He needed a 130. Are you serious? That's when you call me up. We can take care of that. Ain't nobody gonna be kept out for no 3 points. Propaganda, the information that we get. All of everything you read, listen to, watch comes to you through 5 companies, most of it. AOL, Time Warner, and Disney are the 2 largest media corporations in the world. Followed by Bertelsmann, Viacom, which bought BET in the year 2000, and Rupert Murdoch's News Corp. Those 5 account for 95% of everything you read, watch, or hear. We do not have an independent black record label in this country. You need to understand that. Rockefeller, Jay-Z's thing, that's a subsidiary of Universal. 50 Cent, his G-Unit, that's a subsidiary of Interscope. You do not have a black independent company. You have a bunch of front companies that look like they're independent, but they're not. That's why Michael Jackson is dead. Michael Jackson was murdered because that black man, despite the self-hate he had, owned half of Elvis Presley's catalog and 100% of the Beatles catalog. Whenever you heard a Beatles or Elvis song or somebody bought it, Michael Jackson got paid. And that pissed a lot of people off because they had a problem with the fact that a black man owned the rights to the two most popular American music groups ever. So what Sony Records did to try to get the catalogs back, they sabotaged Michael Jackson's last album, Invincible. They didn't give it no promo, no advertising. He sold almost nothing, which put him in debt to Sony. Because that's the way they set it up. If you don't sell enough, you in debt. Even when you sell enough, you're still in debt. So they said, Mike, you owe us a couple million. So guess what you're going to have to do? Give off the catalog. Mike said, I'm not giving you nothing because these catalogs are worth way more than that debt. So he decided to go on concert over in Europe. The guy asked him to do one. It sold out on one day. He asked him for 10 more. Sold out on one day. They said, whoa! This man at 50 still has the appeal he had at 5. So they asked Mike to do another 20 concerts. So he had about 50 concerts. They went to Lou Ferrigno, the Incredible Hulk, and said, hey, that's his trainer. Is he fit? He said, yeah, he's in better shape than a 20-year-old. He can do the concerts. So Mike was going to use the money from the concerts to pay off Sony, keep his catalogs. He made one mistake. He went back to LA to practice at the Staples Center. He was living with his brother in Dubai, United Arab Emirates, who told Mike to come back here. I hate to say it, but I wouldn't be surprised if one of his own blood relatives said he might be. That black man in jail did not kill Mike. He's just a fall guy. When he get out, he's going to have a whole lot of money waiting for him for keeping his mouth shut. Sony Records killed Michael Jackson. And Michael was going to do what? Use the money that he made to build the first truly independent black record label. Could you imagine if the world's #1 selling artist of all time starts a record label? What does that do to all the other majors? They go bankrupt because all the talent is going to come to Michael Jackson. Here's a man with 6 albums on the top 100 selling of all time. Thriller, 1 album, sold more records than every artist on the top 100 today put together. 1 album. Thriller went 126 times platinum. Do y'all know what that means? 100, you get Little Weezy, the one who looked like a roach, Little Weezy. He sell 4 and we go crazy. Weezy 4 times. Michael Jackson was 126 times platinum. Nobody even close. But you know what was a shame though for me? When he passed away, Obama. And you know, Mike had given more money to humanitarian causes than almost anybody in American history. I thought Obama was going to give the family a plaque. You know what this Negro says? Well, now maybe he could be mentioned amongst the greats, like Elvis Presley and Frank Sinatra. That's what Obama said on national TV. You weak wimp ass. This man, Elvis couldn't tie his shoes. So not, and then he wouldn't even go to the Staples Center and say something out of respect for a man who gave more money to black people than Obama ever did. That's when I knew I was done with him anyway. I can't stand him. I want to debate him. $500 billion industry mind control. That's how much money they spend on giving you false information. Intelligence testing, we talked about that. Psychiatric medicine. In 1967, the United States government did a long-term research study on the long-term effects of black people exposed to psychiatric medicine. From the results of the 1967 study, they decided to start giving our kids Ritalin and start giving y'all crack. Ritalin and crack came to the black community the exact same year. Do your research, 1980. This was a wholesale thing. We're gonna hook the kids on crack and the children. And if you think I'm playing, let's talk about Tupac's mother, Afeni Shakur. Legs McDaniel, Afeni Shakur's boyfriend, when she was in a Black Panther party, was a paid FBI informant whose job he was assigned. His assignment was to get Afeni Shakur hooked on crack. That was his assignment. So y'all don't know how wicked this FBI thing is. Y'all don't know about the CIA thing. And why should you know about the CIA? because they're the biggest drug dealers in the world. Every drug in your neighborhood is approved by the CIA. Every last one of them. CIA is cocaine import agency. The CIA was started by a Wall Street banker. Why would a Wall Street banker start the CIA? What Wall Street got to do with the CIA? Because the drug money gets washed through Wall Street. Y'all heard of Freeway Ricky Ross, who was selling drugs for the CIA? We know the CIA is the biggest dope dealers. Why do you think they went into Afghanistan? Because the Twin Towers dropped? Nonsense. They blew them up themselves. First off, they went in Afghanistan because Afghanistan is the #1 opium and poppy producing region on the face of the earth. The Taliban burned the poppy seed. And so they sent Colin Powell. And guess what U.S. News and World Report? They said Colin Powell gave the Afghanistan government about $10 billion to replant the poppy seed. Why is the Secretary of State of America giving an enemy government money to plant drug crop? Because drugs is America's #1 economic source. Why? Because you don't need a new car every day. You don't need a new pocketbook every day. You don't need a new laptop, a new phone every day. The only thing guaranteed to sell every day in the world, rain, sleet, snow, shine, winter, spring, summer, fall, is drugs. If you stop drugs in America, you won't be getting your pension when you retire. You stop drugs in America, you won't be getting your Social Security money. That's right. Drugs is America's #1 source of income. Don't you get it twisted. If you don't believe me, you need to read the book Dark Alliance by Gary Webb. Gary Webb was the white reporter over in LA who uncovered the CIA drug smuggling efforts in the black community, and they killed him for it. He was killed right after the book came out. Dark Alliance. Dark Gary Webb. They killed him for it. He had the documents in there. And his other CIA agents who retired here came up and said that the CIA's job is to smuggle drugs into the black community to fund American efforts in countries where the government is not sensitive to American interests. So they sell drugs in your community. That's unmarked cash. That's unmarked cash. They take the unmarked cash to a third world nation. They want to kill the president of the Congo. So what do? They come in there with $3 million unmarked dollars from the ghetto of Philadelphia, New York City. And they say, here go $3 billion. We want him dead in 2 weeks. You want this money? He needs to be dead. Have you noticed that this so-called, what do they call it? The people, the uprisings, the Occupy movement, Occupy Libya, Occupy Wall Street, Occupy Spain, all of those were FBI movements. None of them was legitimate. Didn't you realize that every country that got destabilized was countries with leaders that America didn't like? If it was the people causing a grassroots change in government, why wasn't there one change in countries who you get along with? That's right. And that's why we in the black community got to be very careful. You know why? Because I can see them starting a black revolution where FBI agents set up a situation for a lot of our young people to go out in the streets and get slaughtered by the cops and the Coast Guard. Be careful. Because there's a lot of Negroes running around talking big and bad. You need to get guns and fight the cops. Are you crazy? You don't make a bullet or a plastic button. Who you gonna fight? Who you gonna, what we got? A slingshot? Nothing. You decimate the whole community. We gotta be intelligent. And maybe next time I come back, I can do my military science presentation for y'all. We ain't even gotta sit, give me a break. Homosexuality, 1972. Rockefeller World Population Council of Planned Parenthood said that they wanted homosexuality out of this book. 1973, American Psychiatric Association, they voted out of this book. 1974 was the first time this book came out without it listed. And why was it taken out of the book? Population control. Why is Obama threatening the president of Liberia right now to cut off her World Bank and International Monetary Fund money unless she makes homosexuality legal in Liberia? Population control. Why are there gay pride parades in Ghana and Nigeria, two of the oldest kingdoms in the world, never had no homosexual problem? Now they have parades that march into the street. Population control. Why is Obama telling the president of Ghana and the president of Uganda right now that if you don't make homosexuality legal, we're going to cut off your funds? These are some of the oldest kingdoms on earth. The oldest kingdoms on earth. Obama is saying if you want this money, same-sex couples got to be legal. You think it's about marriage rights. They got nothing to do with it. It's about black population control. If everybody in this auditorium chooses to only cohabitate with somebody who has the same reproductive organ that you have, where do the next generation of black children come from? They don't. Every time. Every time. Every time. So don't get caught up in that, where they're born like this. Don't get caught up in that. That's irrelevant. The question for you is, does this help or hurt the black community? That's the only question. Every black man who's with the same sex, there's no children. You can't make children that way. Every woman who's dating another woman, no children. Those two queens supposed to be given life. Neither one of them given life. It's about killing our numbers off, y'all. If you don't believe me, I'll give you a document you can read for free. Download it when you get home off the internet. It was the Henry Kissinger, and I'm going to wrap up. National Security NSSM 200. Download it. That is the population control law. What year? 1974. Is it a coincidence? That's the same year that homosexuality was no longer in his book? He said in the document, you can read it, he said we need to start teaching sex education in school. Sex education in the schools. We said, good. Maybe our kids know how babies are made and they can use condoms and birth control pills. They didn't tell you that that was just a pretext to homosexual education. State of California, I was just there in December. It's mandatory. Chicago, I'll be there on Monday speaking at a graduation. In Chicago, they have an all homosexual and lesbian high school. If you ain't gay and lesbian, you can't go. Right now. And guess who built that? Barney Duncan, the same man President Obama made Secretary of Education. Who did Obama put in charge of safe and drug-free schools? Kevin Jennings, homosexual, who said, what? I want mandatory gay curriculum in every public and charter school in America. That's right. We don't hate nobody. Nobody. We all know people who are sexually confused. We don't hate nobody. No more than I hate somebody who's depressed. Okay? But I reserve the right to disagree with somebody else's cultural lifestyle that they're trying to push on me. Okay? Most of our boys who are gay were sexually molested before the age of 12. I know because I work with them. I ain't reading out no book. You're talking to a therapist. 95% of every homosexual black and Hispanic boy I've met was sexually molested before the age of 12. Nearly everyone. And the girls who are lesbian, 95% of them I've ever talked to and did therapy with, because he's sexually abused by men or grew up in a home where they saw women get abused by men. This ain't got nothing to do with nobody's DNA. This is about psychopathology and poor childhood experiences. In conclusion, at the Frederick Douglass and Marcus Garvey Pan-African School for Black Boys, and the Amy Ashwood and Amy Jakes Garvey and Anna Douglas Pan-African School for Black Girls, there's going to be 6 sciences that we're going to teach. We're going to teach agricultural science, because if you can't feed yourself, don't talk about freedom. Agricultural science. We're going to teach economic science. We are a money illiterate people. We don't know anything about investments, stocks, bonds, resources. The stock market. We got to master this. Education is not about working for white people. Education is about building our own selves up. What's the third science? Dietary and nutritional science. We need to know how to eat to live the real way. Also, military and political science. That's right. We're going to teach our sons and daughters how to shoot. That's right. White kids learn how to shoot guns. Jewish kids learn how to shoot guns. Asian kids back here, we learn how to shoot. They shoot each other anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Learn it for the right reasons.
Exactly.
In political science, understanding one's enemy. We don't understand our enemy at all. We don't. Malcolm X said what? Malcolm X said the black revolution is the only revolution where we fight for freedom and then seek acceptance after we won. Spiritual and astrological science. We are a spirit people. We got to connect to the heavens. That's what we do. I'm not talking about Reverend Hoopenhauer. Y'all heard about kleptomaniac Dollar? They said he got arrested for choking his daughter. In the name of Christ. Eddie Wrong molested them kids. In the name of Christ. Nothing's wrong with the religions. We got to watch who we choose to show us the way to it. Christianity can be a very revolutionary thing if used the right way. Islam, Hebrewism, any of them, African traditional religions, Ifa, Dogon, Yoruba, Kemet, they can all be used to support the struggle. My Rastafari brothers, One of the reasons I respect them so much is their religion and their nationalism is hand in hand. First time I went to a Rastafari service was in Miami. Remember the first one I was there? It blew my mind because I'm sitting there and these brothers are singing nationalist songs. They're bigging up Marcus Garvey in the religious service because there's no separation between religion and politics, religion and nationalism with them. Say what you want to say about the Rastafari. They're the only black religious movement I've seen yet whose religion supports our revolution.
Right.
Everybody else's religion, there's some kind of an exception to it. I was raised Muslim. They don't want to hear nothing about black consciousness in the mosque. All they want to do is roll their pants up, grow a beard, dye the edges. Salam alaikum. Excuse me, I'm an African. Okay? Hotep. I'm no Arab, and you're not going to make me into one. Africanize the religion. And the last science is what? The science of black family maintenance and development. Our girls got to learn how to treat the young men because they forgot. The young men got to learn how to treat the young ladies because they forgot. Our whole relationship thing is in shambles. We ain't got time to do my black male-female relationship slide. We'll do that next time. But that's a whole other thing that we got to fix because if the family don't work, nothing else does. My ancestor Frederick Douglass. My family came to America in 1701. Black man by the name of Bailey, stolen from the Igbo nation of Nigeria. In 1720, he had a daughter by the name of Selah. In 1740, she had a daughter by the name of Jenny. In 1774, Jenny had a daughter by the name of Betsy Bailey, who married a free black man by the name of Isaac. Talbot County, Eastern Shore, Maryland. They had about 12 children. One of the daughters was named Harriet. Harriet was raped by the slave master who owned my family, Aaron Anthony. She gave birth to Frederick Augustus Washington Bailey in February of 1818. At the age of 20, Frederick would escape to freedom. He would drop the family name of Bailey and pick up Douglas to evade capture under the fugitive slave law. A year later, Harriet's younger sister, young Betsy, was raped by the same slave master, giving birth to my great-great-great-great-grandfather, Frederick's brother, Stephen Henry Bailey. Frederick and Stephen were brothers because the slave master was their dad, but they were cousins because their mothers were sisters. Stephen married a black woman by the name of Caroline Wilson Bailey. Their firstborn child, a strong black man by the name of George Washington Bailey, my great-great-great-grandfather, who went on to become the first black public school teacher in Talbot County, Maryland. When the Civil War kicked off, father and son, Stephen and George, fought side by side, 9 battles, United States Maryland Colored Troops Infantry. The two elder sons of Frederick Douglass, Lewis and Charles, fought in the famous Massachusetts 54th Colored Infantry, from which we get the movie Glory. After the Civil War, George Washington Bailey married Annie Wayman. They had a daughter named Caroline. Caroline relocated to Philadelphia. She had a daughter named Vivian. Vivian married a Cuban immigrant who spoke Spanish, Cicero Noel, my great-grandfather. I never understood what he had to say to me. They had a daughter by the name of Ida. Ida had a son by the name of Jamal. On August 21st, 1974, I was born 13th descendant of the first black man stolen from Africa. Douglass said, if there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet depreciate agitation are like men who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain, but they don't want to deal with the thunder or the lightning. They want the ocean, but they can't stand the awful roar of its waters. He says the struggle we have might be moral, or it might be physical, or it might be both moral and physical, but it must be a struggle. He said, find out what any people will quietly submit to, and you have found the exact measure of injustice that will be used against them. He said, the limits of tyrants are prescribed by the people who they oppress. He said, for 20 years, I prayed on my knees for freedom, but God didn't give me freedom until I got up off my knees and began praying with my feet. He said, if you want respect, stop looking for pity. The man who pities you can't respect you, and a man who respects you need not pity you. But most importantly, he said, power conceives nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. Ashe.
Yes.
Questions? Anything?
Q&A, got a mic.
Politics, education, relationship, racism, you name it.
Peace, brother.
Peace, Queen.
I'm just overwhelmed right now. I really am. But my question to you is, how do we as a community stop the black on black crime, starting with the youth, and then move into the adults, because it's just really disheartening. Our kids are killing each other. Our parents, they're fighting each other. We're fighting each other with words, with deeds, with all kinds of stuff. How and where do we begin? What do you suggest?
Well, number one, the self-hatred is not genetic, it's socialized into our children. They learn to hate themselves by watching us hate each other. The average child learns how to hate other black people because they watch their parents hate other black people. So it's socialized. But I like what you said about starting with the children. I believe in starting with the children. Trying to fix adults is too risky of a task. Frederick Douglass said that it's better to raise healthy children than to repair broken adults. In the black community, we spend too much time trying to fix grown-ups. Somebody who's over the age of 35 ain't likely to change their political thought. Whatever they believe, that's what they want to believe. You ain't gonna be able to do nothing with it. We need to shift our focus from the adults and put it on the youth. I'm convinced that we will not get out of this condition until we start raising up the children the right way in the first place. Sending a black child to public schools controlled by people who don't have their best interests at heart is criminal. For 18 years, you send a child to a school, okay, where they're taught everything about how great Europe is and nothing about the greatness of Africa, and then expect them to come back to the black community and work for the improvement of black folk when they've been taught for 18 years how worthless we were, isn't going to work. So building independent schools is the most revolutionary thing that we could do. The most revolutionary thing that we can do. Now, a lot of us, we're impatient. We say, we need to do something now. We could build a school, but we got to wait till those kids get 18 before they can contribute to the revolution. That's true. I'm not saying stop what you're doing. I'm saying recognize that everything we're doing is reactionary. It is trying to reverse a problem that's already been started. I'm saying if we begin with those children and raise them and socialize them correctly, we wouldn't have to worry about fixing adults because all the children would have been raised the way that they need to be. We got to stop working after the fact and start being more proactionary and preventive. That's our biggest problem. We got the money to do it. But as Marcus Garvey said, the greatest problem amongst black people is that we have been cursed with petty differences. He said we find reasons to disagree with each other. You have a black meeting, we want to fight. First of all, the black men all got big egos, so everybody think they should be in charge. The women are catty because there's always somebody who looks cuter than you. You got a problem, right? So you got the Muslim versus the Christian, the light skin versus the dark skin, the one who went to college, the one who didn't go to college, the one who come from the bourgeois suburbs, and the grassroots brother. And we just clash over superficial titles. We got to be willing to put all that nonsense to the side because we are at Skid Row. This is ground zero right now. The and by the way, y'all, public school is about to be abolished. In the next 40 years, there will no longer be a public school in most places. Maybe it'll survive in Long Beach. They're shutting them down and they're converting them into prisons. Why? Because they no longer have a need for black men in American society. We were brought here to serve, and we're no longer needed to serve. There's more than 3 million undocumented illegal immigrants who are willing to work for less than minimum wage, and the reason why they are allowed to stay here is because the corporations want it that way, and the federal government is agreeing with the corporations to let the illegal immigrants stay here in exchange for them not moving their business to a third world country. So they're letting them come in and take jobs. Isn't it amazing that they can give jobs to illegal immigrants when half the black men in New York City are unemployed, half the black men in Philadelphia are unemployed, half the black men in LA, Houston, Atlanta unemployed? This is what? This is social engineering in the service of racial extermination. And I know when I talk, people look and say, wow, I never heard that before. Is it being excessive? I'm not being excessive. I'm being honest. I work in the prisons. You ain't seen nothing till you see a 9-year-old boy who ain't but 3 foot tall coming in with an orange jumpsuit with shackles on his ankles and shackles on his wrists. When you see that, that's when you know how bad the situation is. And do you know that black recidivism is at about 85%? 85% of the black people who go to jail are doomed to be criminals. They're likely to go back again and again, not because they want to be, but there's no economic opportunity out here. Criminals are not born. Criminals are made. America has been making them ever since she's been born. Go back in American history 80 years. Who was the drug dealer? Were they black? No. Who was hustling the liquor? Were they black? No. Who was running the rackets? Those were Irish, Italian, and Jewish immigrants who were cut out of the American economic order because it wasn't until 1940 that Jews, Irish, and Italian were considered to be white people. If you don't believe me, do your history. They called them guineas. They weren't even white till 1940. They became white in 1940. And at that time, they started giving them the police district. They gave them the fire department. They gave them the civil service jobs that they still control to this day. And they gave you the illegal underworld that they used to run. Nobody said Meyer Lansky was born to commit crime. Nobody said Bugsy Siegel had defective DNA. Nobody said Lucky Luciano had to be a criminal for life. So why are we letting them tell us that our kids got to be criminals for life? If you miseducate a boy and you economically castrate a man, you prevent him from being able to provide for him and his children, you just made a criminal. Anybody here today, including me, and I've never been to jail except to serve. Not time, but the people in it. If you take from me my education, take from me the opportunity to take care of my two daughters, and guess what I'll be doing? The same thing they did. So why do we ride past them on the corner like we so damn self-righteous? Why do we do that? We ain't no better than them. In fact, we worse than them. Because at least they ain't hiding what they doing. And we trying to act like that the reason they out there is totally due to their own fault. The average reading level of a black person in prison in America is the 3rd grade. That's the average reading level. So you mean to tell me if a boy can't read by the time he finished the 3rd, he's not likely to find somebody to show him for 9 more years by the time he reaches the 12th? That's how sick it is. In Pennsylvania, they're building 4 new maximum security prisons right now. New Jersey building like 8. New York building like 10. Who you think they building them for? For us. It's a shame because when a black boy is born, and you know how difficult it is to make a boy, we're happy because that's another African life. But at the same time, you're sad because you know what the system got in store. They got a whole rites of passage for our sons because we ain't got one. By the time he's in 3rd grade, he should be in special ed. By the time he's in 6th grade, he should be on drugs. By the time he's in 9th grade, he should have a record. And by the time he's 20, he should be in jail. We should be ashamed of ourselves. Absolutely, y'all. We cannot stand here and let this go on. We got to stop being lazy, and we got to organize. Parents in Long Beach, 4 committees. Y'all need a special ed committee to investigate all these black kids being put in special ed. You need a suspension committee to investigate all these black kids who are being suspended and expelled from your schools. You need an economic finance committee to invest where the money of the school district is going to, because I can tell you, public school is a hustle, and you got people getting a lot of your tax dollars who ain't doing nothing with it, even though that money's supposed to be going to your children. And the 4th committee is the policy committee. Y'all have to look for problems in the school system that y'all do not like, that disproportionately affect our children. I'm talking about the regulations. The laws come from the state, but the regulations come from the local district. Y'all can change those regulations, but you got to get organized. Marcus Garvey said the greatest weapon used against the Negro is disorganization. Huey P. Newton said we are the most apathetic people in the world. We don't do anything for our condition unless we're forced to. We got to change that, y'all. It's the 21st century. We're about to go into a new age, the age of Aquarius, in December. The universe is going to realign. The ancestors, God Almighty, all of the spirits, the Orisha, the Netaru, everything's lining up for us to go back to where we used to be. We have a chance to fix these problems that we created for ourselves over the last 1,000 years. The political and the spiritual has to be aligned, and we have to align it. We got a chance to make history this year. We got a chance to make history in the next few years. You live through a millennium, you live through a new century, you live through certain solar eclipses, and I'm not a whole spooky type of a guy, but I know truth when I see it. And I fervently believe in my heart that if black people organize ourselves effectively, we will be able to change and transform our condition, and our prosperity will be better off for it in the next 1,000 years. Yes. So let us pray, let us meditate, but most importantly, let us organize, let us politic, and let us unify, because only through unity can we overcome this crisis. Was it the elder or the queen? Go with the queen.
Always show the queen.
Go ahead.
You mentioned earlier that part of the reason for disobedience in our male children in school was because of the feminine educational system. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Sure. It's real simple. We could eliminate half suspension, half exposure, half ADHD, half the medicine, half the special ed, half the gangs, half the fights, half the dropout by giving every black boy a black male teacher. It's literally that simple. 93% of all public school teachers are middle-class white women. There's no men in the schools, black or white, except as principals and some teachers here and there. It ain't even enough white men, but we need black men for black boys. We cannot allow them to sit there. Because I tell you, sometimes the black female teachers can be worse than the white ones. Many of the women objectify their black male students as the man that they have problems with at home. And they take out all that pain and hurt that he caused them onto somebody else's innocent ass son. I say it on a regular. So our boys have to be saved from the feminine energy because they get too much of it. They get it at home all day. Now they got to get it at school from 8. There's too much feminine energy in them boys, and then we shock when they start being effeminate. We have a record number of effeminate black boys. I'm not talking about the homosexuals. I'm talking about those who exude a feminine energy who may not be gay. Too much of that is going into that system. You could organize and make the schools hire more black men. They do it for the white kids coming out of college. Teach America, y'all heard of these programs?
Yeah.
Where they go and get the white kids and they pay off their student loans to come and work in the ghetto for a couple of years. They earn their stripes and then they get a job in the suburbs. That's the way it goes. Okay? They can take that same money, redirect it to black men and say, look, we're going to pay your loans off if you come back and teach your own. Why you don't hear no talk about that? Because the public schools exist for white women to have jobs, not black men. You change the whole economic order if you start taking them jobs away from them and give them to our men. You see, but that's the solution. To make them hire black males. They don't want black male principals. They don't want black male counselors. They don't want black male teachers. They don't want black male school psychologists. I knew a school psychologist I was trying to get hired in Philadelphia. They told him they wasn't hiring no more psychologists. You ain't even got no black males. How you gonna tell him you ain't hiring him and he's a certified black male psychologist? Because they don't want them. You know why? Because if I'm in the school, if he's in the school, if he's in the school, if he's in the school, we're not going to sit by and let nobody mistreat ours. You're not going to suspend him unnecessarily. You're not going to go get him hooked on drugs unnecessarily. You ain't sending him for special ed. We ain't going to go for that because we men. So what do? Keep us all out.
Another question. I just wanted to say, I don't know if anyone saw the CNN report, but they are building private organizations are building jails now.
Yes.
It was on CNN the other day, and also when we're talking about the schools, we have one of the only African American teachers in our junior high school. We have only one African American teacher, female.
Teacher period? Just one?
Yeah, just one African American teacher in the junior high school. And we have one of our only African American male teachers who's a board member here, and he's here today doing a very diligent job in the school system, Mr. Reggie Nines. And also, we have another one of our teachers in the school, Mr. Ronnie Miles there. He works in our school district, so I just want to say both of them work in the school. And also, I'm sorry, one of the sponsors of this event, Wendy Guzman, is here. She's one of our wonderful teachers in the school district.
First one on the psychological evaluation process. The PowerPoint isn't, but I have a presentation of Learning While Black, which I did at the Lefrak City Library. That's back there. Who Will Save the Children? I got several.
Okay, the first one you mentioned was the title, what was it?
Manufacturing Madness.
Manufacturing Madness.
Yeah. And also two of our other black young ladies, African American young ladies who work in the school district right here. Give them a round of applause.
Where they at?
Right
Where
here.
they at? Where they at?
Where they at?
I know who you are.
If it wasn't for them, a whole lot of our children would be getting suspended and kicked out of school.
All right.
What was that question?
Yeah, Hotep, I really enjoyed your Hidden Colors story. I want to recommend that to everyone. However, I'm growing a little, frustrated over the reinvention of the wheel, as it were, because when you speak of Garvey with his Universal Negro Improvement Association, and then his schism between him and Du Bois at the time, and then when he came here ostensibly to work with Douglas, but Douglas died, right?
Booker T.
Booker T, right. Sheldon G. But then Booker T with Tuskegee Institute. And then, the Nation of Islam with all of their systems. I attended the University of Islam. I was born and raised in the nation. And I see the model. I see a snapshot of what it could be, but there's no sustainable model that that's self-perpetuating, that we don't have to come to this same point every time and reassess what the problem is, overanalyze what the solution should be, and get caught into the nuances of things that actually don't translate into anything actionable that can resemble at least what goes on in Chinatown. What goes on in Washington Heights, Manhattan, in Philly. I don't know what model you have there.
Chinatown.
Yeah, but I'm saying everyone else is able to produce that model. Harlem, where Malcolm called the Black Mecca. Yeah, in population, predominantly black, but the businesses are predominantly owned by others. Where is the model? If we talk about Oklahoma, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Black Wall Street, not sustainable. Rosewood, Florida, not sustainable. Chicago has, between Michael Jordan, who generated over $1 billion worth of revenue to the state of Illinois during his career, it's the headquarters for the Nation of Islam. Oprah is based there. Jesse is based there.
Jesse Jr. They all there.
But Chicago is in worse shape than New York.
Because you're talking about bourgeois blacks. Let me speak this.
Now, also, and I'm but also,
and they're all self-serving elitists.
Right. But they also matriculated in the same school systems that educated many of us. And they have the compassion for us as a people. And they...
let me interrupt because they said that time is... So let me speak to you. I got you. Okay, couple things. Number one, this is why educating the children correctly is so important. The reason why Chinese people go to Chinese stores and not other people, the reason why you'll never see a Chinese store in a middle-class white suburb, because they won't support it, they'll support their own, because those children are raised with a Chinese identity, an Italian identity. They are taught to love who they are from birth. We teach our children not to love who they are, but to love a false identity recreated, which is this African-American piece. Amos Wilson dealt with this a lot, so I don't need to add much to it. But identity is economics and politics. Because if the children are raised to see themselves as American, then they can support any business that is American. Chinese American, Italian American, Arab American. They have to be taught that they are African and unapologetically so. Now, with regard to the movements that came after Garvey, all due respect to all of them. Mr. Muhammad did great things. Noble Drew Ali did great things. A lot of them did great things. The Black Hebrews did great things. But they were not Pan-African. The only one that was the Rastafari. Most of them told black people not to look at Africa for a relationship, for mutual buildup. Elijah Muhammad wanted nothing to do with the continent. Drew Ali, nothing to do with the continent. Father Divine, Daddy Great, they undid Garvey's work. So you got to reinvent the wheel. Because after Marcus Garvey got deported in 1927, all these other people who came had no serious international program for black people. They simply said we want America to give us 3 to 5 states in the South. What type of a joke is that? So they can do what? Put you all there together and flood the waters and have a big Katrina for all the Negro people? It's not realistic, it's not functional. Black nationalism is not Pan-African nationalism. It has been a failure. To say you don't like your oppressor, but to say you don't want to leave him is a contradiction that we are not dealing with. You mentioned Tulsa, Rosewood, Charleston, South Carolina. I'm in a documentary coming out now, the Wilmington Massacre of Wilmington, North Carolina. White power does not allow black power. So whenever you build up an independent community, they're going to trash it because white supremacy does not allow for black equality. So the question becomes, how long do we beg to be a part of something that has never wanted to do with us before we go and build for our damn selves? That's the question. We are more American in our thinking than we are African. And the last thing I'm going to say is this. In the aftermath of the civil rights movement, one of the things that hurt us is that the American social order created a black aristocracy. We already had bourgeoisie, but now we had a super government-backed bourgeoisie. They created a buffer class of black people whose job is to keep the rest of us in order. They go by the name of Al Sharpton. They go by the name of Jesse Jackson. They go by the name of Tavis Smiley and Cornel West. And whenever something goes wrong in the black community, take Trayvon. Those black people down there, they was ready for revolution, and they sent Sharpton down there to gain their confidence in the president, go home, and let common heads prevail. The black bourgeoisie is the most dangerous enemy to black people. The most dangerous because they're the watchdog for the system. See, when you jump over somebody else's fence, before you get to the master, you got to deal with the watchdogs. And that's how the black bourgeoisie function. You got 5 families in the black bourgeoisie. The religious aristocracy. Your imams, your megachurch ministers, who ain't nothing but hustlers and pimps, whose job is to keep black people sitting there doing nothing, praying for God in the afterworld, doing nothing about the world they live in. You got education bourgeoisie, all these so-called cultural nationalist black scholars who y'all can't wait to bring in for a lecture, who do nothing for the black community, absolutely nothing but pimping. Then you got your blacks in the entertainment industry. They on TV, they in the newspaper, they in the radio, and all they do is spend their whole show talking about nonsense. The NFL, the NBA, Beyonce's baby. They're not talking about the killings. They're not talking about the unemployment. They're not talking about the messed up schools. You know why? Because the people who advertise on those shows are white, and they don't want to hear anything about what their cousins and brothers are doing to keep black people oppressed. Then you have the economic bourgeois. These are the black people who got millions of dollars. These are your Bill Cosbys and your Oprah Winfreys and your Jay-Z's who got all this money and do nothing with it except the wrong thing. And then the 5th family, you got is status. These are black people with titles: chief of police, school board president, state rep, state senator, block captain, vice president of this, a whole bunch of powerless titles. And they use their titles to make you think they can somehow help you out and never can, because they're all token positions. So until we recognize a bourgeois when we see one, we'll never get out of this condition. And the one thing we got to stop doing is looking to college-educated black people to save us. What did Carter G. Woodson tell us in Miseducation of the Negro? That the college-educated black man and woman are seldom of any use to their race, because the education they get takes them away from their people. Stop looking for people with degrees. I want grassroots people. I want grassroots brothers and sisters. I'd rather struggle with a brother from jail than a brother with a doctorate. What the hell am I going to do with a brother with a $350,000 mortgage?